So welcome back. We're back from the Whole Foods, and we're going to chop the vegetables just for kind of background. So as far as gumbo goes, there are two distinct styles. There's Creole gumbo, which a lot of people are familiar with. That's New Orleans style. Usually has a lot of seafood. It also has a lot of tomato, okra, that sort of thing in it. We'll be making Cajun gumbo, which is Southwest Louisiana, where my people are from. That's very simple. Those people pretty much ate whatever they grew or could catch, save the only thing that they really didn't grow and probably bought. Actually, I'm sure they bought was vegetable oil and flour, which will be later on in this process. But right now we're talking about the vegetables. So in Cajun cooking, there's something called the Holy Trinity, which is onion, celery, and bell pepper. So pretty much the basis of all the Cajun cooking has the Holy Trinity in it. I'm going to be using both kinds of onion. That's a yellow onion or a Spanish onion. What you always have in gumbo is also the spring onion, the green onion. So we'll be using that as well. I like to use both. I like the onion flavor. A lot of people just use the green onion. So what you want to do is start with the celery. Just chop it into smaller pieces here. I like to chop all the vegetables up in the gumbo into small pieces. That way they kind of, over the cooking process, they kind of disappear. I mean, you get the flavor of them, but you don't see like big chunks or pieces of them in there. So I like to chop them up kind of small. About that size. Celery wise, it's kind of up to your taste. I like to only use 2 ribs of celery. A lot of people use 3. Also depends on how much you're making. If you're making more than a standard like 8 or 10 quart, you're going to of course need more celery. This will be fine for our purposes. So again, Cajun gumbo is very simple. You have the Trinity, you have your spices, Cajun spices, which really are only cayenne pepper, black pepper, salt, onion powder, and garlic powder. So you can make that yourself, mix it together, and use it in just about every Cajun dish. Or if you want, you can go to your local grocery and buy Tony Chacheries. Or the new one is Slap Yo Mama. It's not new. It's new kind of outside of Louisiana. That's a more Cajun recipe or more Cajun mix of the seasonings than Tony Chacheries. Tony Chacheries tends to be more like a Creole type seasoning. So we've got our celery there. We're going to do this onion. Again, I'm going to dice everything up pretty small. And this is a very small onion. Went to Whole Foods because there's never a line there because they're so extremely expensive. And as you can see, the onion's very small. Ooh, I need to sharpen this knife. And you kind of pile all this together because it's all going in the same pot. Some pieces are a little bit too big there. And then your green pepper, just a standard green bell pepper. I'm not a huge fan of bell peppers. I don't mind them in the Cajun recipes because they're an integral part. But like I said, I'd chop them up really fine. Probably don't use as much as other people. Sometimes I've seen people do 2 bell peppers, and this is kind of a small one, so I probably could have used 2. You want to get the core out of it and seed it. You can use the bottom, but I don't like the bottom. And if you want to chop it small, make some room on this board. Julienne it first. And take the julienne pieces, turn them sideways, and chop them. Don't hit your fingers. And don't worry if I skip over something or go too fast. At Mateo's request, I'm going to put the recipe as much as I can muster into the description on the video, so you'll be able to read what you need. Okay. I'm going to turn this off for a second, get these in bowls, and then do the green onions. All right, we're back. So now these are green onions. You can buy these in the grocery store. Fortunately for me, I have kind of an herb garden out in the back. And as you'll see here, after I wash these off, I take the very end pieces. Don't throw those away. You can stick them in your garden. They grow literally like weeds, and then when the freeze comes during the winter, they die. But mine keep coming back as soon as it's spring. So these came out of the garden. They grew just in the last about 3 weeks. So I'll put some more of these in there, kind of refresh the garden, and we'll get some more out of that. They're not really expensive, but they taste better if you grow them yourself. So we're going to use all of this, the white part and the green part. I'll save the top part, the green part, for garnish on top of the gumbo when we're finished. So you just want to chop these into like little small pieces. Top part's a little tougher. And again, a lot of people, and I have done this before, only use this onion. So even in the cooking process, not just for garnish, they only use the green onion, celery, and bell pepper. I like to add a little yellow onion because they're a little sweet. Adds a little bit different onion flavor as opposed to just the green onion. Green onion has a stronger flavor than a yellow onion. All right, those are chopped. Put these in a bowl. Oof, smells like onions in here. And these really green, very top parts, like I said, you kind of sprinkle them on the gumbo at the end as a garnish, but they also taste good. The ones that you put in the gumbo, again, they kind of disappear. um, the way the other vegetables do after you've cooked it for a while. Gumbo, as I said, is very simple. In this gumbo, we're going to be using the Trinity, which will be the celery, both the green and the white onion, and the green bell pepper. We're going to saute that in a little vegetable oil. We'll also be using, normally you would use chicken thighs, like boneless, skinless chicken thighs. I've got a freezer full of meat, and I have some chicken breasts in there I need to cook because we've been in there for a while. So we're going to use that today. So you'll cut those up in chunks. I'll show you that in a little bit. We'll season them with Cajun seasoning and Anduille sausage, which is like a smoked sausage like you would buy at the grocery store, only it uses spiced ham, Cajun spiced ham inside as the meat. And it's more in chunks instead of being like ground up. So we'll cook the chicken breast, seasoned with the Cajun seasoning and the Anduille sausage in a little bit of olive oil in a skillet first and kind of brown it. That's not necessary. That's what I like to do. You can just cut the chicken and the sausage up in chunks and cook it in the pot with the rest of the stuff. But I like to saute the meat, pull it out, put the vegetables in, saute it, then put everything in the pot with the roux. So your ingredients are the Trinity, Cajun seasoning, your chicken and sausage. Again, Anduille if you can get it. If you can't, just use whatever your favorite smoked sausage is. A little bit of vegetable oil. And then when you make a roux, all that is equal parts of vegetable oil and all-purpose flour. You have to preferably use a cast iron skillet or some kind of skillet with a very heavy, thick bottom, because you're going to cook it on medium to medium high heat, stirring it with a wooden spoon, the oil and the flour together until it gets, well, I'll show you the color of it, but it gets like really dark chocolate color, brown. You have to pull it off as soon as it gets that color because it burns really easy. It's something you have to learn over time. A lot of people will pull it off when it's like peanut butter or milk chocolate color, and that's okay. You're just going to have not quite as good of a gumbo. But what you're trying to do is make a roux and cook the flour taste out of it before you add water or chicken broth, which I use a mixture of both, and then the rest of your ingredients to it. So it's very simple. I'm not going to actually video making the roux because it takes about 45 minutes, and I don't want to leave my camera on me stirring 45 minutes, and you would get bored watching it anyway. So I'll make it and I'll show it to you afterwards, and we'll show you how to assemble everything. All right, I'll be back in a bit. Okay, we're back. So, excuse me, we're in the middle of what we call the pollinating here in Texas, which means everything's covered with yellow pollen, so I'm having allergies like crazy. So this is about a little under 2 pounds of chicken, which for a small gumbo, that's about what you would use. What we're going to do is cut it up into smaller pieces and then add our Cajun seasoning to it. Again, that is just equal parts of salt, black pepper, cayenne pepper, onion powder, and garlic powder. So we'll season the chicken before we brown it. We also have Anduille sausage we're going to cut up. You don't need to season Anduille sausage because it already has all that stuff made into it. But I do like to put it on the chicken, let the chicken kind of absorb a little bit of it. So we're just going to take our Serbian chef's knife, cut this big breast piece lengthwise, and then cut it into chunks, about 1 inch, I guess. And we'll do the same with these smaller pieces. And be very careful not to stick your finger underneath, especially this knife. It's really sharp. So, you know, chunks about that big. This one's going to be a little bit bigger piece because it's an odd shaped piece. So we'll spread those out. On the board here. I don't know how you guys do at home, but I have different color boards for different chopping. Like the yellow's my chicken board. If you noticed before, I was using the green. That's for vegetables. So we're just going to take our, dry my fingers off. We're just going to take our Cajun seasoning and sprinkle it over the chicken. And then get a good coating of it. And we'll flip it over. We'll season the other side because, like Emeril Lagasse says, I don't know where you get your chicken, but my chicken has two sides. Every time I show somebody how to cook something, I want to do the Justin Wilson thing and tell a joke. So I think I will. So you guys want to hear a Cajun joke? Okay, I'll tell you. So one day at the local lumber yard in Thibodaux, in walks Guidry. He walks up to the manager, Broussard, and he says, "Mr. Broussard," he says, "I would like to apply for a job for a lumber salesman from you." And Broussard looks at him and he says, "Guidry," he says, "you blind. How can I hire you? You don't know what you're looking at. You don't know what wood you're going to be selling." He says, "That's true, Mr. Broussard, but," he says, "when you get blind, your other senses get high, you know." He says, "Oh, is that true?" He says, "Yeah." He says, I can tell you any wood, what it is, how big it is, if you put it in front of me." So Broussard says, "Okay." And he calls his secretary over and tells her to go get a board and put it in front of Guidry. So they put the board underneath his face and he sniffs. And he says, "Oh, that's the easy one." He says, "That's a 2x4 yellow pine." And Broussard says, "Well, you could have guessed that. I mean, that was probably too easy." He said, "We're going to have to try something else." And he goes, "Okay, man, whatever you want. You put it in front of me." So Broussard has the secretary come back with a piece of plywood, puts it in front of Guidry's nose. Guidry sniffs it. He says, "Oh, that's too easy too." He says, "That 4x8 treated sheet of marine plywood." Broussard says, "I'll be damned." He says, "You're right. That's what it is." He says, "I'm going to try you one more time." He says, "If you get this one, I'm going to hire you." He says, "All right, Mr. Broussard, you bring it." So Broussard tells his secretary, he whispers to her, he says, "Hey, take all your clothes off and lay in front of him." So she does. She's laying in front of Guidry. He leans over, sniffs her. He goes, "Oh, Mr. Broussard, I think you're trying to trick me." He said, "Can you flip it over?" So she turns over. He sniffs again. He goes, "You are trying to trick me, Mr. Broussard. That a shithouse door off a tuna boat." So that is not one of the Justin Wilson jokes you would have heard on the TV show, especially on PBS, but he used to have comedy albums, and that was one of the bits off of the comedy album. He could get a little blue on those. So we have the chicken seasoned. I'm going to put it over here on a paper plate. Just get it out of the way till we're ready to saute it. We'll go to the sink here and clean this board. Very very important. I'm sure you guys know, but when you're handling raw chicken, you gotta wash your hands and board and everything else before you touch anything else. You can make somebody sick. So I'm gonna wash my chef knife real good. And now we're gonna cut the sausage, and that's really all we have to do with the sausage is just cut it up. And that would be this. Now that's something I got at a local grocery store. Haven't tried it before. It looks okay. So I'm hoping it's good. Generally, the only really good Anduille sausage I ever get is actually in Louisiana at one of the small meat markets. The stuff they sell in the grocery stores is closer to, actually usually is just smoked sausage that they put a little Cajun seasoning in, but this is what we have, so this is what we use. So you're gonna cut these into like 1/2-inch pieces. And again, we don't have to season them because they're already seasoned. If you can kind of see inside there, that does look a little bit like Anduille, so it's got a little bit bigger chunks of meat rather than most sausages is like pureed meat before they stuff it. So this might be okay. All right. So that is what we need for the meat. And we'll shut this off. We'll reposition over at the pot on the stove and cook this up. All right. Now we're over at the island where my cooktop is. I put about 2 tablespoons of oil in there. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but it's shimmering, so it's hot. I started off on high heat. So we're going to put the chicken in there now. Get our wooden spoon. Start getting that to brown a little bit. And put a little bit more Cajun seasoning in there. Put it in to taste. It's not super hot. There is cayenne pepper in there, but you know, it's like 1/5 of the total, so it's not like burn your mouth hot. It will give a little bit of tingle at the end of your eating, but that's what I like. I hope I get the camera in there so everybody can see. Yeah. Looks like it. Just gonna kind of brown this on all sides. We're not gonna cook it through because it'll get cooked through when we assemble everything in the gumbo. It'll cook for a good hour to hour and a half after we get everything inside. While we're waiting, also while we were on the break, I made the roux. So that's what it looks like. You see, it's like dark, almost dark chocolate brown, but I pulled it off before it actually burned. When you first start doing this, you probably will need to pull it off when it's a little bit lighter than this, because it goes from this to burned in like milliseconds. So, but I always remember this is, all that is in this case, 1/2 cup of vegetable, 1/2 cup of flour. If you're making a big pot, and I'm not, I'm making a small pot this size. My other gumbo pot's about that tall. You would use a cup of flour and a cup of vegetable oil in a thick bottom or cast iron, preferably skillet. You just put it on medium heat. Take your wooden spoon and just keep stirring that until it gets the color you want. In a minute, after we're done with this, we'll do the vegetables, and then we'll add our chicken broth and water. And when that starts to boil, that's when we'll put this in there, and you'll see how the gumbo juice, as we call it, will come together. So the chicken, you just have to flip to make sure you're getting all sides brown. And again, you don't have to do this step if you don't want to. The chicken will cook just fine if you put it in after we do the gumbo juice. I just like to have, it creates a little bit of extra taste on the chicken if you do it this way, and then pull it out and put it back in. The chicken also, when it gets thoroughly cooked, is going to get really soft, so there'll be they'll break into smaller chunks. Let me get a that's about all we need there. We just want to get a little bit of brown color on it. Get some of that Cajun seasoning to stick to it. I'm going to use a slotted spoon, remove it to a plate. I'd turn the heat down to like medium-low to just for reference. And now, if you have a really big pot, you can do this at the same time as the chicken, but I didn't want to crowd the pot, so we're going to put the anduille in just for a couple of minutes. And get a little brown on it too. Turn the speed up a little bit. Also makes your kitchen smell real good. The anduille while it's cooking. So all this stuff back in the area in Louisiana that my family came from would have been homemade. We wouldn't have bought any of this. A couple of times, probably once a quarter, we have a family get-together called a butcherie, or boucherie, which they would kill a 300, 400-pound pig. The whole family would come out there. There'd be stations. After they killed it and bled it and boiled it, got all the hair off of it, the thing would be broken down into hams and sausages. A lot of it we ground into ground pork for boudin, which is a Cajun pork and rice stuffed sausage that I'm very fond of. We'll do that on another episode. That would usually be eaten alongside, like as an appetizer for gumbo or etouffee or any of the other main dishes. But they would take all day to do this, and at the end there would literally be nothing left of the pig except the hooves, because they would use everything to make some other dish with. And then it would get distributed pretty much equally throughout the family. They'd keep a portion of it for that night to have like maybe gumbo, boudin, some things like that for like a celebration or a fete dough. And in our family, in most Cajun families, there's a band, so they would have zydeco music, and everybody would drink and eat some of the pig from the butchery. The rest of it would go home with you for you to eat off of for the next quarter. So that's pretty much good enough. The sausages, as I said before, is cooked. You just want to get a little bit light browning on it. We'll go ahead and pull that out, and then we'll do the vegetables. I'm going to cut this off until I get it ready for the vegetables. Okay, we've got the meat out. Now we're going to put the vegetables back in, and then we'll start off. We'll start off here with the onion and peppers and celery. And this may seem like a lot of that to you folks, but trust me, after an hour or so, most of this is going to disappear. It literally cooks into the broth. And we'll put some green onion in here. We'll leave some for garnish. And again, all you want to do is sweat this down. I've got it on like medium-low heat. We're using the oil and the renderings from the meat in here just to saute it down a little bit. And again, depending on how much you like of it, you can hit it with your Cajun spice again. I happen to like it, so in it goes. Okay, when our onions or yellow onions start to get a little translucent, a little color on them, now's when you're going to want to put your liquid. I'm going to crank up the heat. We'll start off with some chicken broth. Again, some people just use water. Some people just use chicken broth. When I'm making seafood gumbo, which is the exact same process, only you wouldn't have any sausage, or we only put shrimp in it, no sausage, no chicken. Then I would, instead of using chicken broth, I would, after I peeled the shrimp, I would boil them with the Trinity and maybe a bay leaf and make a shrimp stock and use that instead of water or chicken broth. And let me get some water. I'm going to put a little bit of water in here. So your water or chicken broth or combination of the two to roux ratio is about 3 heaping tablespoons of roux to a gallon of water. A little more if you like it to thicken a little more, a little less if you like it a little thinner. Just kind of a taste more. I'll put a little bit more chicken broth in there. Hold on for just a second. So as I said before, this is about half as much as I normally make. I usually only make gumbo when we're having a family get together. That'd be my daughter's family and someone like my cousin maybe. usually on a holiday in her family. So I'm usually making it for about 12 to 15 people. I'm going to have my family over, my daughter and her family over tonight. So this is just going to be enough for about 5 people. Okay. So now I got about a little over a gallon of water slash chicken broth in there. We're going to let that come up to a boil and then reduce it until it's just above the simmer, and then we'll start putting our roux in and stir it. So we're going to put a little bit more seasoning in here. And once we get the roux in and get it dissolved, then we'll start putting the chicken and the sausage back in. Smells really good in here, by the way. And then, of course, like most of you folks have joined my channel from Reynolds or some other Filipinos channel, so like the Filipinos, all of this would go over rice. And I'll, after I get this going, I might, it's kind of boring, but I might show you making a rice in my grandmother's rice pot, which is about now 75, 80-year-old pot, but and it only ever gets rice cooked in it. So it might be interesting. I might or might not do that. So now it's beginning to boil. When the whole thing starts to boil, I'm going to turn it down to about medium low, and we'll start adding the roux about a tablespoon at a time and stirring it in until it's dissolved. Okay, so we'll turn it down. I'll grab a spoonful of this roux. And you want to keep stirring it as well. Another tablespoon. You don't want to put it all in there at once because the bigger the glob of it, the more chance it won't dissolve completely. And then you'll have these that look like little tar balls in your roux, which you don't want. You want it to be smooth. And then big clumps too will sink to the bottom and tend to burn at the bottom of the pot, which you don't want a burned, smelled type gumbo. Again, a little bit at a time and keep stirring it so it encourages it to dissolve. Turn the heat up a little bit because when you're stirring it, it keeps it from boiling. There we go, boiling again. You can kind of see, I hope you can see on camera, it's the juice itself is turning a little like chocolate brown now. So the more we get dissolved in there, the more dark that roux color is going to get. The juice. Again, I made way too much roux for this amount of gumbo because I'm used to making a much larger pot. We've just about got enough roux in there now. So that's about half of what I actually made roux-wise. And again, it's a individual taste thing. Some people like their roux thick, like a gravy almost. My family never had it that way. So I'm more of a, I like it to be more like a soup broth. But the longer you cook it, the darker it's going to get, and the more, and the thicker if you boil it. So I know this is probably boring for you guys. Trust me, it would have been really boring watching me make the roux in the first place. There is, by the way, another method of making roux, which I would recommend if you've never done it before. So rather than frying the roux in oil in a pot, I've only done this once. It actually did work. One of my friends, who's also Cajun, told me about this. So you can take a sheet pan and just put all-purpose flour, like a cup or two, on a sheet pan, spread it out, and then put it in the oven on like 400 degrees, and keep watching it about every 10 minutes or so. It's actually cooks the flour, with the heat from the oven, and it's less likely you would scorch it that way. So you just have to keep watching it in the oven until it gets the color you want, and then pulling it out. Then you can just take the powdered roux, which I know they sell in the grocery store. I'm assuming that that's the same way they make that. Then you just take the powdered roux and dissolve it in the water just like this, and come up with the same thing. So it's going to be hard to see on the camera, but the roux, when it thickens, it kind of coats the spoon a little bit. So we're just about at that stage now. And again, you want to watch for any lumps and kind of smash those down if there is any. I don't see any. And now we can put our chicken and our sausage back in. And give her a stir. You see that's getting darker now. So I'm gonna let it cook just above a simmer, probably with a lid on it, for about an hour. And then all that chicken will cook through and get more tender. All the flavors from the chicken and the anduille are gonna seep into the broth, or the jus. Another truism about this and a lot of other stovetop dishes like this is, if you cook this and eat a bowl of it, put it in the refrigerator overnight and warm it up and eat it the next day, it tastes 10 times better the next day. So I'm going to get that up to a simmer, which we're just about out now. As soon as we reach that, I'm going to go ahead and cover it and turn off the camera, and we'll come back to it in an hour. All right, I'll see you in an hour. Okay, neighbors, it is approximately 2 hours after we started cooking the gumbo, and it should be done now. I've turned the heat off, let it cool down a little bit. So let me give it a stir. So there it is. It's the color you want. There's your sausage and your chicken chunks. So I used my rice cooker, my grandmother's rice cooker. And I got some rice dished up here in the bowl. I'm just going to grab some. And we're going to put a little bit of the chopped green onion on top as a garnish. And there you have it. This real authentic Cajun gumbo from South Louisiana. So we'll give it a taste. A little bit of rice, Anduille off camera. Stacy bon. Very good. That Anduille sausage is actually really good. So anyway, that's how you do it. I, again, will put the recipe into the, if I can figure out how to do it, into the description. And then I'll upload the video maybe tonight, probably tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in to see it. And maybe next weekend I'll do something else. So let me know if you like it. Give me some criticisms as to the camera work. I'm sure it's horrible. And hopefully you can hear me okay because I'm using my phone. So thanks again, everybody that subscribed and liked my last video. And thank you very much for coming to look at this one. I'm going to eat. Bye-bye.